Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Friday for our special session on incorporating active learning within an online management class. My name is Debbie Clare, the Executive Marketing Manager for McGraw-Hill's Management Portfolio. You've all been muted upon entry to minimize background noise, but please do feel free to type questions in the chat function, and we'll address those during the Q&A at the end of our session. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce award-winning teachers Angelo Kinicki from Arizona State University and Kent State, and Patrick Soleymani from George Mason University. I also want to note that Angelo Kinicki publishes 2 market best-selling titles, Principles of Management for Us, as well as in Organizational Behavior. So gentlemen, let me go ahead and unmute you and take it away to Angelo.
Hello, thank you, Deb. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join our session. It tells me that you care about your teaching, which is something that Patrick and I share, and while we're very excited to have this time with you. Before I tell you what we're going to do, I want to tell you a quick little story. I was playing golf about 2 weeks ago with an executive, and he says to me, I know that you profs, and whenever somebody starts a sentence with you and then a group, I'm waiting for a stereotype, and he goes, I know that you profs are not happy about COVID and what it means, but he says, I bet you're really happy that you don't have to work so hard because now you're teaching online. I wanted to hit the guy over the head with my club. He really thinks that teaching online is easy. So I proceeded to try to inform him how teaching online is very difficult. And one of the things that's very difficult is to get students engaged, because that takes active learning. And that leads me to this slide. COVID has created a lot of changes. Many of you out there probably don't know whether you're going to be online or face-to-face. Regardless, we know that we have to rethink how we're going to teach today's students. What I'm going to do today is start off talking a little bit about Gen Zs, because those are the majority of the students we face. And actually, you're going to learn they have some characteristics that make an online education very consistent with what they want. I'm going to start off talking about that. Then I'm going to go into active learning, review what it is, and then I'm going to share 10 active learning techniques with you. Just because of the time, I can't go through them all in detail, but I'll mention them. Then I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and he is going to demonstrate the application of a couple of these active learning techniques using some digital assets that McGraw-Hill has available to you all. So without further ado, let me begin and talk about the students that we're facing. So you have certainly heard about Gen Z. Those are students born between 95 and 2012. We all know that's the first digital native generation. They're used to digital devices. They like them. They like connectivity. A few things you may not have known about them. They're very pragmatic and they're very career oriented. And part of that is due to the Great Recession that we had about 15 years ago. Some other characteristics is, this doesn't surprise you, they like to multitask. They really like seeking online information. Now that's an important one, because I think when you're teaching online, you want to be able to have them use things that are online to seek information for assignments and that sort of activity. They like that. Really prefer hands-on learning. They don't like lecturing and theory, and they prefer interactivity and collaboration. Now, those are a little more difficult to get going online, but they certainly still can be done, particularly when you see some of the assets that McGraw-Hill has for you. Now, without going through all the research that went into this, and I began studying this about a year and a half ago for use on my textbooks, I wanted to know, what is it that Gen Zs, how do they like to learn? What's their preferences? So here's a quick summary. Well, the first thing, this doesn't matter on this broadcast, but lecturing doesn't fit for them. So online, maybe if you're doing some lecturing modules, that's good. Don't make them too long, 5-10 minutes. That's about it. They don't like lecturing. The top instructional methods are and the focus of today, active learning or problem-based approaches. Actually, those two words sort of mean the same thing. Active learning, as you'll learn, involves solving problems most often, so those go together. They really like practical things, so they'll like case studies, whether these are cases that are in the textbook or these are cases you might assign or video cases. They really like them, and they like discussion-based learning. So online, the challenge for us is, how do we encourage the discussion? Well, clearly you can use threaded discussions, but you can also have subgroup discussions. We want to try to encourage that. The Gen Z students like that. So research, this was interesting. I was curious if research has actually tested active learning versus traditional teaching methods. And I was shocked to see that there were well over 200 studies. I found a meta-analysis. For those of you who know what that is, it's an aggregation of all the empirical work done on a topic, and they found roughly a half a standard deviation higher on grades. So that's almost a grade higher by using active learning. And you can see from the slide, students were less likely to fail in active learning environments. So that's great. What does it say? So far it says Gen Zs like active learning, and if we can incorporate them in online, it can be a good experience. So contrary to what we hear in some of these news reports and students suing universities saying, hey, this online stuff isn't giving me what I need. Online learning can be great, but I'm going to add the proviso if you build in some active learning components. And like I said to this golf idiot, it takes work and effort on your part to do that. So I hope we can give you some good ideas about doing that. Here's a fun little face-to-face online learning environment. Maybe some of you teach in that. So let's go through the basics of what I mean by active learning. And very simply, this slide shows you it's any kind of teaching that involves students doing things, thinking about things. That can be done face-to-face or online. And we also know that one of the reasons that the learning is higher, because when students are doing things, they're participating. When they're participating, they're more actively engaging their brains, and therefore they're going to learn more. So these next two bullets really, to me, are the crux of implementing active learning in an online environment. You've got to have students practice skills. Now, this is really important, because it means that you as the prof need to decide what are the most important skills you want them to know. For example, for me, whether I'm teaching management or OB, one of the things that I really want them to practice is critical thinking. Another thing I want them to practice is communication. And face-to-face, that would be both verbal and written. If it's online, it's more likely going to be written or through discussion boards or through their assignments. So think of the skill in whatever it is you're teaching that you want them to learn, and then investigate how can I practice them, whether it's through some kind of an exercise or a video or what have you. So students are also generally asked to critically think, solve problems, deal with evaluate things, and then bring their recommendations through writing or discussion. And we all know that you can do that in an online environment. It's just thinking through what are the activities, the tools, or the methods for doing that. Now, I want to summarize what I've been saying about online by linking to Bloom's taxonomy. For those of you who have not heard of Bloom's taxonomy, here's a slide that shows the rows. Those are Bloom's taxonomy. It's about how people learn, and it goes from the lowest level of learning, which is remember and understand, up to the highest level of learning, which is create. Now, the column headings represent various digital assets that McGraw-Hill has for my particular product. So this slide here really is Bloom's taxonomy crossed by assets for my products. What I want you to see in this figure is the growing upward trend of the assets and how it advances learning. Now, here's what I think is really important. You cannot get to the higher levels of learning, say, analyze, evaluate, and create, unless you remember and understand. Now, this is one way in an online environment that I think McGraw-Hill has something great to offer to you, and that's their product called SmartBook. It's an adaptive learning experience where students are quizzed as they're reading, and the software will not allow a student to advance the reading until they've mastered certain concepts. The reason it's beautiful for online is because you're not there in a face-to-face regular basis to know whether they're grasping the material. SmartBook can help you to know that, and it has a reporting mechanism to tell you the level of mastery. You cannot get, I'll repeat this, the higher levels of learning without the bottom one. So whether you use SmartBook or some kind of quizzing, if you want to implement active learning, you must try to ensure that you've accomplished remember and understand. So let's assume that you've done that. And again, either SmartBook or quizzing. Now you can go up and use some of these other techniques. So let me link these techniques to actual active learning techniques. So there's 10 of them. Think, pair, share. This is something I do all the time in face-to-face. It's where you, and I don't know that you could do this online, maybe Patrick has an idea. It's where you might say, hey, okay, here's a problem we're facing. We have employees who are receiving more money from unemployment than they are by coming back to work, and companies are having a hard time getting their employees back. Pair up in a group of 2 or 3 and tell me what you think the government should do or what a manager should do. Think, pair, share. You give them a problem, you ask them to think about it, they solve it in a pair, and they normally share that. In an online environment, maybe you can do that in some kind of group work. I'll let Patrick speak to that. Discussion, obviously, we do it all the time in face-to-face. In an online environment, it'd be some kind of threaded discussion where people contribute. That is active learning. Debates, we all know what those are. Problem-solving work groups, you can clearly do that in online, setting up separate chat rooms for your different groups where they talk to each other, maybe solve a case or some other problem that you might give them. Self-assessments and surveys, that's another active learning technique. So in an online environment, if your product that you're using has self-assessments, say, evaluating my personality, I could take it, get feedback, and you could give the student a short assignment of saying, well, what are the implications of this personality profile that you have for getting your first job? Or you might change the question to, how can you demonstrate in an interview that you're conscientious? Conscientious happens to be one of the personality characteristics that's predictive of success. In other words, you take the assessment and turn it into some kind of a written assignment. That's how I would do that online. Demonstration, analysis, and evaluation. Well, that is where you show the students how to do something, you model it, and then you have them practice it. Now, when I'm trying to do that face-to-face, I like to use role plays where I will demonstrate something and then have the students do it. Case studies is another active learning technique. Clearly, you can do that in an online environment. You can do them so it's a written assignment, or you could give the case study and put out some threaded discussion questions and people could answer them. Guest speakers, simulations, a great way to do active learning, and Patrick is going to demonstrate one of those for you. He's also going to demonstrate for you a video case that is set up to get students to do critical thinking. And finally, the last one is prediction. Prediction is where you ask the students to make a prediction about something. So, for example, you might say, hey, based on what you read in this chapter on motivation, what do you predict is the motivation of some person who's in the popular press, whoever that might be? Another thing you can do with prediction, I like to do this with the video case that Patrick's going to demo in just a moment, is I like to show the video, stop it, and say, okay, what do you think's going to happen? We just saw this manager talk to an employee in a certain way. What do you think will happen? And then you have a little debate, you play it, and you come back to it. That kind of a thing. In an online environment, what I would do if I'm using this video that Patrick's going to show you is I would ask these questions and have students analyze them as part of watching the video and turning in some response to it. Okay, so before I turn it over to Patrick, let me end with this. Teaching in an online environment is difficult, takes a lot of effort, I get that. And the part that we really want you to try to incorporate in your next class is, how can I use several of these 10 active learning techniques? And to help you with that, Patrick Soleymani now is going to, in the context of teaching motivation, talk to you about how to use what's called a manager's hot seat in an application-based activity, what we call an ABA, which is a mini simulation. So thank you, everyone. Any questions that come to me, we'll get at the end. Let me kick it over to Patrick.
Thank you very much.
I'm giving the ball to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb. Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Or if you're on the West Coast, I guess you still have another hour of morning. And it's great to be with you. If you just give me one moment, I'm sharing my screen now. So as Angelo mentioned, there's a lot of great stuff that we can do to be able to assess students on career readiness, competencies, on critical thinking and problem solving. One way that we could potentially do this is through the use of videos. You know, there's many different types of videos, and a lot of studies have shown that after lecture, which hopefully we're not doing as long as we've traditionally done, but after lecture, videos are the next most used tool in the classroom, whether the classroom be face-to-face or in this case online. So I wanted to show you a type of video called a manager hot seat, and preface that with the fact that not all videos are made alike. So if someone says, oh, well, I'm using a video to inspire active learning in an online classroom, I would be very curious about what type of video that is, because some videos are really great for those lower level blooms, like what Angelo was talking about on the remember and the understand side. But then you need some other particular types of videos that cover more complex situations that hit higher levels, that you're able to apply material, analyze material, and evaluate material. So with that in mind, I wanted to show you what we call a manager's hot seat. And just like the name implies, these put the students on the hot seat where they have to now make decisions about whether the folks in the room did the right thing, whether they were able to solve the problem, and to be able to critique the way a manager handled the problem. There are over 10 of these right now in just Angelo's principles book. There's more that are currently being filmed. You'll see the quality in just a moment. It's pretty good. I'm going to show you a piece of one which is on motivation. For those of you who are familiar with the concept, this is going to cover process theories of motivation. I'm really hoping that my speakers will work when it comes to projecting for you, but what I'm also going to do is to put the closed captioning on. I'll let this play for about 30 to 40 seconds, and then I'll come back and talk to you about it.
Patrick, you may want to try and get your speakers turned up. I'm not hearing anything, but I do see the closed captioning.
Yeah, the speakers may not work, but we'll just check the closed captioning. Sometimes they don't work on this. Okay, so I apologize if you're not able to hear the audio. Sometimes with WebEx, presenters aren't able to put the audio on. But here's what's happening here, just to lay it out. You have baggage handlers. Hopefully everybody remembers what baggage handlers do. There were something that we used to call airplanes that we used to fly around on. They've sort of been grounded for the most part now, but hopefully we'll be able to get back on soon enough. Well, these baggage handlers do a really important job. This is a new motivational plan that's trying to reach performance goals. And so the plan says that if baggage handlers are able to hit certain metrics, whether it be lost bags or on-time departures, they will get bonuses. And as you may imagine, this is causing some concern amongst the baggage handlers. So the supervisor is a gentleman who has the longer hair, who's looking there at the two handlers and is presenting this new sky blue plan. The issue is there's a lot of problems with equity between locations, with goal setting issues, with the feasibility of the goal. So you start getting into expectancy theory, with the value of the goal itself, so the valence. And all of this is playing into the situation. Of course, they're not bringing up those names, but students should be able to identify as a first step what issues are in play. And that goes back to what Angelo was telling you about SmartBook. It's really important that students are reading before they see a video like this, because if they're not reading, and if we can't make sure that they're reading, they won't be able to hit on the issues that they need to be able to first understand before they can move up blooms. So this video is almost 6 minutes, so it's not a terribly long video. And what you're going to see if you watch the whole video are the baggage handlers grilling their supervisor about different scenarios that prove to be problematic and prove that the overall incentive plan is a bit weak. So imagine for a moment what you can do with a video like this. So when I think of my lesson plan, and I'm going to be starting off an online sort of course with this, or a module, what I would do is I would potentially have a lecture that's recorded. I would have that there, very short on motivational theory. And then I would have students actually watch this video. I'd assign this in my learning management system, which is Blackboard. And I would also have them do some auto-graded multiple choice questions that are involved, which is a great way to make sure that they're understanding the nuts and bolts of how the theory applies here. But then I'd really want to move up Bloom's taxonomy and really get them analyzing. Remember, we want to graduate problem solvers, not just folks that can regurgitate motivational theory. So what I would do is I would create questions, and I would create discussion threads, and I would ask students to analyze the weaknesses of the incentive plan. And then what I could potentially do as part of my lesson is to put them in groups. So it can either be parent shared, the way Angelo was talking about, or a group discussion, all of this contributing to active learning. But what we could then do is to have them put together a new plan, a revised incentive plan, taking into consideration what they know about equity theory, expectancy theory, and goal setting theory, right? So that is now hitting on the highest level of Bloom's, which is creation of something novel, right? So imagine with this one video, you're able to hit the lower levels of Bloom through remember and understand, and then move your way up in an online atmosphere. And again, for those who are doing it in class, there's another great method that Angelo had first introduced to me, and I use it when I do teach face-to-face, and that's actually being able to pause in different parts of the video and cold calling students and asking them what the manager just said and what is implicated by that, and what response the manager is probably going to get for that. So again, it's great. You can put students in the hot seat. We can do it face-to-face, but we sure as heck can also do it online and move up Blooms there. So this hot seat is one activity that's available for you. There's also other types of videos. As you can see, the quality is great. This one was just shot about 1.5 years ago. So these are very new. They have recent material in them. People have iPhones. They don't have old phones. You don't see big chunky computers. You see iPads and laptops. So very, very recent, and it should resonate and keep students engaged. So I want to show you one other type of activity that's available for you. And if you just bear with me here, I'm going to go into student view on my Connect screen. So Angelo discussed simulations, and this is one of the new fun activities. You know, most of our classrooms are filled with Gen Z students. As Angelo mentioned, they're a very important generation. This generation was born with an iPad in its lap. Everything was very much gamified for this generation. And so a lot of times it's about meeting students where they are to help them learn better. And so simulations go a long way in accomplishing that. So I'm going to show you, staying on the theme of motivation, a simulation on reinforcement theory, or, in the OB world, sort of contingent consequences. And this is about a company called Ship It. It's sort of like your typical UPS or FedEx, and it can't stop losing or damaging packages. And as a manager, you need to figure out what's happening and help the organization through. So again, this simulation is also known as an ABA, is available through Connect, and sort of we'll start here. And my video is not on today, but if it was, you'd see some spiky hair, probably not as purple as here. My wife's been attempting to cut it for me lately, so I'm trying to keep it as short as I can, but you'll probably would see something like that. So here's what's happening. You have a couple characters here. The characters are right up here. You have Ronaldo, a finance manager, Megan, a plant operator, and you have a narrator who's helping you here. So the company, as I mentioned, is losing packages. And really, this goes back to the theme of critical thinking and problem solving. We don't want students graduating and just repeating things that they've learned. We want students to be able to look at charts, graphs, data points, other types of information, and to be able to think critically about it, interpret the information, and be able to make wise, informed decisions. And these simulations go a long way in accomplishing that. There are two panels here. This right-hand panel is where students are presented with charts and graphs, sort of what you're seeing here, pictures, other types of information. On the left-hand side, you see conversation and questions. So if we go forward here, we start seeing that there are different types of questions that are available in the simulations. The first type of question is what I call a looping question. A looping question is a typical multiple choice question. It has a right answer and a wrong answer. And usually these are coming from the associated course content. So the wrong answer here would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. When I deliver the wrong answer, it tells me no. It tells me why it's not. It provides me with feedback. It eliminates that answer choice and then allows me to choose the right answer to get points and move forward. My score is at the bottom right. I can see it right there. It tells me with feedback why the answer was right, and then I move forward. I'm not able to move forward till I choose the right answer. Well, now we get into what's really, I think, the juicy part of the simulation. These are branching questions. This is where you're really using the power of this technology. You see, in the real world, we don't always make the best decisions. We may think we do, but we don't. We don't always make horrible decisions, yet we may have. And we don't always make perfect decisions. Life, as we know it in the professional world, is not a multiple choice question. It doesn't always have one right answer or one best answer. The simulation is taking that into consideration. There are multiple responses here on how we should move forward in providing reinforcement to our employees. There may be one answer that's a better answer. There may be one answer that shouldn't even belong there and you can't really even move forward with it. There may be another answer that's the best answer. What the simulation does, it allows you to choose a sub-ideal answer, move forward, see how that answer made an impact in a potentially sub-ideal way to the organization, and then make a decision to put you back on the better path. It's sort of like testing out before you actually take an act in real life. What a simulation is meant to do. Think of a flight simulator. When you're trying to train, you do a simulation, and if you do something wrong and you crash the plane, nobody loses their life. The program just shuts down. And what we're trying to do here is to be able to simulate different theories. So here we can move potentially forward by punishing employees. We can move forward with positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. I'll tell you this, punishment is not the best route to use, but you know what? We're going to let the student choose the route if the student thinks that's the best way forward. It'll give some partial credit. It'll make sure that the student understands what it means to punish. So we're looking at scheduling guidelines. We see that people have some paid time off. Saturday is optional work. These are the hours. Well, if we want to punish them, we can potentially make them work on Saturdays at regular pay and not give them 1.5 times base pay. So that's a punishment. Let's see what happens when we do that. We send them an email. We tell them that this is what we're going to do. You're going to now have to work Saturdays at regular pay because you're losing too many packages. Oh, wow. Look at the errors now. They've actually gone up. So maybe that wasn't the best way forward. Maybe using punishment as a first step wasn't a great way to start the attempt. So again, you may be able to go back on an ideal path. So here we try to use some negative reinforcement, reduce some of the pressure that we have on employees, looking at some results with that. And look, by utilizing that sort of approach, we were able to reduce the errors. Again, I'm moving quite quickly through this, but you can tab through, you can go back and check the other tabs as you're making decisions here. But what you're really doing is trying to problem solve and seeing in real time with feedback in real time what you're doing right, what you may not be doing right as you make decisions. So what happens is the simulation here is ended. If I was going through this, it'd probably take me a good 10 to 15 minutes for the simulation. I get feedback as I showed you within the simulation, but then I get feedback here on the general concepts behind reinforcement theory and an overall score. And you know what? If I don't get an excellent, meaning I get a satisfactory or an unsatisfactory, this particular ABA has a quick video that I'm able to look at. I'm just going to mute it here because you won't be able to hear it anyways. But there's a video that's available that talks about contingent consequences. It's a real quick couple-minute video. It's animated. It talks about the concept, and it helps students who didn't perform that well be able to see some more details about the concept. And, you know, finally, what I want to really say about the simulations are they're a great way to hit the higher levels of blooms without having to go into a very deep dive on grading. These are auto-graded. We respect your time. We know that you're juggling many different responsibilities between teaching, research, and service. And what we want to be able to do is to help you hit higher levels of blooms in your online classrooms or face-to-face with the least amount of taxation on your time. And we think that's a win for you, a win for the students as well, and we'll be able to produce career-ready graduates by doing this. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen here. Deb, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, so I've taken us off mute. I do want to say that a few folks have put notes in chat. Definitely put your notes in the chat area, please. It's easier for us to get to. Folks were intrigued by the different active learning techniques that you presented at the beginning. I did get a request for a certificate of completion, and so that you had attended this session. Love that. Please feel free to go ahead and email me, and I'm happy to do that. We again will be sending the recording along with the PowerPoint slides for the intro part of the session, since we did go live, so you could see some resources that are being used across. I've put my email address into chat, but let me go ahead and look through chat to see if there's any additional questions. See, Angelo and Patrick are more than happy to answer them. I did have a bit of feedback that said folks were really excited about the new application-based activities or mini simulations. It was something they've been looking for as a resource, especially for a great online environment. So thank you for that feedback that was shared. There's also a question about simulations available in some of our other portfolios. Alina, I'll get back with you, but I do know that we are doing ABAs in most of our markets. And I'll have to check on finance and investment specifically for you, but I know across my management portfolio, we're doing that. We also do it in the marketing course area, introduction to business, but I will need to check on finance and investments, and I'll get back to you. So thank you for that. Let's see what additional, there's questions coming in different spots, so just a minute. I know that folks are also asking pricing questions. So depending on the product, we have multiple options between Reno, inclusive access solutions, ebook options, and then Connect that allows for all of these amazing digital resources. So I would defer that to your local rep so that they can work with you specifically on the product of choice for you. Naturally, affordability and outcomes is critical to McGraw-Hill. We recognize that as being very important. In marketing, someone had mentioned also there's practice marketing, another simulation, because I do know many of you teach across the board. Let's see. Thanks for everyone's patience as I'm scrolling through. Yep, there was a question whether or not these activities are available within Connect. I know Angelo started with that Bloom's Taxonomy tool, moving from the understand and remember state all the way up through those higher levels of learning. So yes, there are activities that move from those introductory areas, which start with the SmartBook 2.0 environment that was released with many of our titles this year, and then move gradually up to the apply, analyze, and evaluate stage. And then some of our amazing teaching resource manuals even go beyond that to help with creation and follow-up activities. So thank you all for those questions. Let me keep scrolling. Oh, I'm just so thrilled. I mean, there's so many folks that want to learn more. So I will take many of these questions, but we do have the simulations that go across our management portfolio. And we will have some coming in the strategic management marketplace as well. Let's see. Bear with me, I'm navigating too. There's a great question, Patrick and Angela. What is the best resource to engage large classrooms from face-to-face perspective, it looks like, is one of the questions that came in.
So I'll try to answer that. I've taught some of these large lectures. One tool that I do use is the Manager Hotseats, and what I do is I put the video on the screen, I pause it during certain areas, and I walk around the room asking different types of questions. Another thing that I do in these classes is I assign self-assessment, and I have them do the self-assessment online. Then when they come to class, I separate them into groups across the lecture halls, and I have them do some follow-up activities based on results. And I know Angelo's here too, so any thoughts you have?
Angelo, you're unmuted, by the way. No, you're muted again. Let me unmute you. Go ahead. Angelo, you're unmuted.
Okay, thanks. So when I used to teach principles of management in sections of 300 to 400, a couple of things I did. One is I didn't know what it was called then because it was a while ago, but think, pair, share. So I would put a question up on the board. Again, it might be something like I like to use current events. So I might put up, how is Donald Trump displaying transformational leadership? Okay, everybody, pair up with the person next to you. You have 5 minutes. I'd like you to use the material on these pages and come up with some ideas. And it would be bedlam of noise as people would talk. And then what I would do is I had, of course, a lavalier on me, but a handheld mic, and I'd walk into the audience and just cold call, put it in front of someone and said, okay, tell me how Trump is showing idealized influence or whatever it is. So you're a little bit of a game host, right? But around a content related question. So you can do think, pair, share. I also used to like to do a lot of polling. So I'd put a question up on the screen, and they had clickers then, and they would put in their answers and we'd see what it is. And then I would use that to have discussions. Also, like Patrick, I used cases. So the case the assignment would be to read the case before you come into class that day. Usually it was a case in the textbook. And then what I would do is put people again in groups of 2 or 3 where they're sitting, give them some questions and let them talk. So in a large lecture, I think the trick is, again, just create what I would call problem-based scenarios and short little problem situations, pair people up, and it's a good way to generate conversation.
Angelo, a question also came out. When you do these types of breakout sessions, whether it's in an online environment potentially or in a face-to-face environment, how long do you recommend for a breakout session? I know it also deals with the activity at hand, but is there a good window? I know from a lecturing standpoint, we're recommending people do less lecture and more activities no matter what you're doing, but can you tell us more on maybe some good food for thought or best tips there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first off, if you really wanted to do active learning, and now I'm going to talk about face-to-face, my recommendation and everything I've read is that you should talk no more than 20% of the class. So, if it's an hour class, then that's no more than 15 minutes or so that you should be talking. So what is it? What's the recommendation? The recommendation is you got to change it up. So if I only have 20 minutes to talk on my lecture, let's say I'm talking about motivation, which is a 2-day class, I only have 20 minutes. I'm going to very targetedly say, okay, I'm going to talk about, process theories and traits, and that's it. Then I go, okay, what can I have them do to create some activity in there? So then I'm going to be looking for my arsenal of tools. Do I have any video? Do I have a group exercise? Do I want to use a self-assessment? And then literally plan it out by, okay, so 60-minute class, I'm going to talk for 20, leaves me 40, and I'm going to spend 15 minutes on the hot seat. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this. So the answer is there's no one set way. It really does depend what the activity is, but what you want to do is move them around. And then if I could for a moment, for those of you who teach management or OB, with my particular products, Patrick and I and a couple other profs created what's called the Teaching Resource Manual, which actually lays out these kinds of activities and how long it takes. So if you're using one of my products, you can go to the TRM, as we call it, and it'll give you time frames for which to complete a variety, hundreds of activities.
So I know that other sessions are soon to start. I'm going to actually wrap things up now, and I want to first thank everyone for spending a little time with us on this Friday. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Memorial Day weekend ahead, to stay safe. I also want to thank Angelo as well as Patrick for sharing active learning techniques and ideas, and also showcasing some of the different assets that happen to be available within Connect that folks are using. I know others are interested in even more questions. Do feel free to email me as well, and I'll get you answers. My email is Debbie, D-E-B-B-I-E, .Clare, C-L-A-R-E, @mheducation.com. But we will follow up with a recording and get back with you all. So again, thank you. I hope you have a lovely weekend ahead, and enjoy seeing you the next time. Bye-bye, everyone.